This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. Daniel O'Brien, K-State grain economist, begins the show as he talks about downward trends for corn, soybeans, and wheat in the futures. He also discusses upcoming report expectations. K-State Extension row crop specialist Rodrigo Onofre keeps the show moving as he covers what concerns there currently are for corn, including tar spot, rust, corn stunt, and corn leafhoppers. Wrapping up the show is Chip Redmond, K-State meteorologist, as he recaps our recent cool and wet weather and the change to hot and humid that we should be expecting. That and more is coming up ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Friday show with the grain market update from K-State grain economist Daniel O'Brien. Daniel, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Shelby.
Daniel, as we always do, what are prices looking like for the grain market?
Well, they've been volatile without question and generally moving downward, particularly on the main grains with regard to we're basically referring to the downward trends we've seen in the corn, soybeans, and wheat markets in the last week to week and a half, stopped the steep descents that we've been seeing in those markets and been moving somewhat sideways. So we stand where we're at. It is interesting to see that we've moved our attention in these markets away from the lead contracts, the July contracts, which are just having their delivery mechanism just around the corner or delivery periods coming in now over to at least the September, for some of the December corn contract, the September hard red winter wheat contract, and also the August soybean contract. And you can see the change when you look at the changes we've had in the open interest and volume in both those what are the second contracts behind the lead ones. Certainly seeing the market shift its attention forward, and with that, I would say the I guess on record technical indicators also indicate that the downward trends we've seen here for corn. We're having a relative strength index in the September contract. Again, an index from 0 to 100, 50% being neutral, basically moving sideways, versus if you get down below 30%, you've got a bearish market, and some would say oversold market. But we've certainly seen that for the last 2 weeks. In fact, and now just yesterday on Thursday, with the market closing up for corn about 7-8 cents, it just peaked over 30% to 31. So it's hardly an indicator of a bull market, but at least it's not stuck in the cellar at below 30 down into the 20s. And really for soybeans, same situation, had dropped down below, basically at 38%. And here for soybeans yesterday, up 19-20 cents. So a bit of a change in market direction. So that's, some will ask, is that an indicator of the bottom for the market? I don't know. I think when you ask analysts that, we waffle around and we really don't know. It really all depends on the preponderance of information coming into the grain markets and and how as a body, all the traders with their different modes, some being on the spec side, others commercials, others index traders, where they take all that. But generally, with both of those crops in the U.S. largely now planted, largely emerged, and really other than some major flooding in some states that's important locally, but still on a large scale, not, you're not talking about 5 to 10% of the crop, unlike what we'd had not too many years ago when the Missouri River Valley flooded, nothing like that. So absent crop damage, now we've got the crop in. We generally have moisture in most areas, not screaming about drought yet anyway. And so now it's off for the rest of, soon it'll be the development period of July for corn, August for soybeans, and grain sorghum following pretty much with corn. So as we go forward, we'll be watching how the crop develops. However we go, we've got a lot of moisture, at least in the Western Corn Belt, to work with. And it's hard to see factors out immediately hitting us unless we get some extreme unexpected heat or whatever, cold, that would derail us from having fairly large crops, pretty conservative view for where prices would go. And really you see it in how the futures are voting with their dollars in terms of the new crop contracts. Your D's corn now at closed yesterday at 442 and three quarters. November beans closed at 1157 and a half. So you got that happening. I should add in, and then for wheat, hard red winter wheat was also up yesterday from 2 to 4 cents along these contracts. And after absorbing generally lower hard red winter wheat crop size and that affecting the supply demand balance sheets, et cetera, we've got the September contract closed yesterday at 629 and a half, is up 4 cents. T's at 644, et cetera. So going forward, you got carries in that market from the July contract 619, again almost in delivery, all the way out to again the May contract at 667, July next year 679, and going on from there. So you have carries in those markets. So just interesting to watch. We do have on I think it's Tuesday of next week, on June the 30th, the USDA NASS acreage and grain stocks reports. That has potential to change some of the perspectives of the market. I think when you look at the amount of questions that we had about the results in the prospective plantings report at the end of March and see what the market is looking at now, it's a head scratcher. To me anyway. We were expecting in that March report to have 94 million acres of corn, ended up with 95.4 million. And now, and we're really concerned about what fertilizer would do, or higher fertilizer prices would do to that acreage number, thinking that, gosh, whether it stays at 95 plus or not, it's probably a question. Well, now we've come in, and the projection by the trade analysts for this report on Tuesday is for 94.99, basically 95, pretty much unchanged, just down slightly. And there's an interesting range, though. On the low side of pre-report estimates, you have something as basically at 94, just a hair below that, 93.95 million by one or two analysts. On the high side, 96.3. You know, Shelby, it's hard for me to shift gears that quick to have expectations of much lower acres coming out of the March report. Suddenly now we're expecting almost unchanged. So I guess I'll really be curious Tuesday what we see, because farmers made their decisions during this time in the interim. Did we increase corn acres as opposed to soybeans? Of course, the issue we were considering was that, well, we shifted acres over to soybeans in that March report, and so now where do we end up with more or less soybeans? So and the March report came out at the USDA projected 84.7 million acres of corn in the U.S., ended up and planted, and the average trade estimate now would be for that number to go up about 600,000 acres, up to 85.367, low about 84, high about 86. So I guess they pay ag economists to wring their hands and wonder about this stuff. Generally, so the number to watch on Tuesday when that report comes out is that trade estimated about 95 million acres. Will we have less than that or more than that? That'll be the big issue. That'd be for corn. Then for soybeans, trade estimated about 85.4 million acres. That'd be about 600,000 higher than we had before. So, I guess it's a balancing act to see will the changes in corn offset the changes in soybeans. I don't know, but I would say, in looking at that corn supply demand balance sheet, if we do end up with something closer to 94 million acres, even with pretty good yields, let's say it's unchanged from what the USDA projected, then just that change of a million or so acres takes projected ending stocks fairly low. You're getting below 1.7 down to 1.6, even 1.5 with any blip that would happen on corn yields. So I I don't think we're now out of the woods, but with rain, and generally rain makes grain until it doesn't, until you get too much rain, too cold the temperatures or something. So there are all sorts of maladies a person can imagine that could keep us to lower yields. But so I guess when the shoe will drop Tuesday on what acreage number we'll use for U.S. corn and soybeans supply demand balance sheet estimates for the rest of the summer, and the corn market would be potentially impacted in an important way, a significant way, if we end up with a number that's a surprise, especially to the low side.
Have our recent wet weather conditions made an impact at all on the grain market in Kansas?
I think probably for us, it would be on the in wheat harvest. Have we been able to get the harvest all out? I think the crop's mainly planted. I think largely some areas where it's not. I do see wheat still in the field. It's reminiscent of some years past where we had the about last half of typical harvest. Rainfall set in, and we couldn't get the crop out, and weeds started to come, and we just had a big mess. So I hope that most people got all or just most of their crops out before we'd end up in that situation. But I in here, my office is in the Colby area, northwest part of the state. We've had way north of 3 inches of rain, way north of that. So it's going to be pretty challenging to get into any of these fields and get anything that's left in the field for wheat actually out.
Daniel, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Thank you very much, Shelby.
That was K-State grain economist Daniel O'Brien. We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today, but stick around because we have more for you up ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we continue our show discussing corn concerns with K-State Extension row crop specialist Rodrigo Onofre. Rodrigo, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me over.
Rodrigo, what are some current concerns when we think about the corn crop and diseases?
Yeah, that's a good question there, Shelby. I think right now we're entering that time window in Kansas that our producers should be scouting fields and assessing the needs for a foliar application, right? So some of the disease that we're going to be concerned or trying to protect that yield, right? I know it's a tough year in terms of grain price, but still, I think we need to keep active monitoring what's in our field. So we're going to be looking to southern rust. It's still not reported in Kansas, and I just check the maps, and there are pretty much no reports of rust right now in the U.S., so just stay tuned for more. I think typically southern rust arrives here in Kansas in that mid-July, early July. And as a reminder, right, southern rust appears on the upper side of the leaf, unlike the common rust, which can be found on both sides of that leaf too. The other tip here as we were scouting, right, the pustules of southern rust are more scattered on the leaf surface, and those spores are going to be more bright orange and will rub off on your fingers, right? Common rust spores are more like a cinnamon brown type color, so just keep that in mind. The usual and gray leaf spot, I think it's something that we have been dealing over the years. If you're planting a resistant hybrid, that should be enough, so you shouldn't be concerned about a fungicide application and stealing that yield. However, a lot of our hybrids still susceptible to gray leaf spot, and we should be scouting for it as well. Gray leaf spot shows up from the bottom of the canop. It moves up, and those lesions are going to be those rectangular lesions for the majority of the hybrids. They can be 1/4 inch to 3/4 inch long, and in a susceptible hybrid can definitely cause a yield impact. And just keep in mind, as we move to central and western Kansas, right, we also have bacterial leaf streak, which can be easily misdiagnosed with gray leaf spot. Bacterial leaf streak, it will have more that wavy edge in the lesion, right? And gray leaf spots more that sharp rectangular type lesion. Last but not least, star spot. It's still something that we should be concerned in Kansas just because it's been a cooler beginning of the season and a lot wet for the majority of the state. Star spot does like this wet weather and cooler temperatures. So just keep that in mind. We have reports of tar spot now in Washington County, Republic, and brown as well, but I expect to see more counties being highlighted in the next few days and weeks. Tar spot lesions, and as we say, the tar lesion, right, are black rays and sometimes have that round elliptical shape. Susceptible hybrids tar spot can be a threat to those hybrids and take up to 50, 60 bushels in a bad year, right? But a lot of the companies now, they are having a lot more tolerant hybrids to tar spot. So to confirm any of those diseases, right, you can always feel free to submit a sample to the K-State Plant Diagnostic Clinic, and of course work with your local K-State agent as well, and always reach out to myself directly too. So Shelby, let's just quick here overview, right? Take a look at the factors that influence cordial response to foliar fungicide application at this time, right? So what we have learned over the years is that, especially for tar spot, that first application should be considered between that V10 to R1 VT timeline. And if a second application is needed, right, just following that kind of like next timeline, which would be R1 to R3. Either before V10 or after R3, it's going to be really hard to pay off. And the majority of times, what we have learned from a lot of research that's being done, that's not going to pay off. So just keep that in mind too. And of course, hybrid susceptibility, right? Just know what you're planting, just understand what type of hybrids you're growing, especially for tar spot, southern rust, right? Just don't assume that you got a tolerant hybrid. Keep monitoring weekly and see what's the progression of the disease, and making sure that we're hitting the right time. A lot of the fungicides that we have available in the market, they're good to excellent for gray leaf spot, but also for tar spot and southern rust, right? So just making sure that you're picking a product that can cover more than one disease.
You mentioned for tar spot, them liking the cooler and wet conditions. And so while I feel like a lot of Kansas is currently experiencing that, are you concerned about a quicker spread across the state?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think in the next few weeks here after this week, right, with these temperatures between 60 and 73, high relative humidity, and of course prolonged leaf wetness, we could be seeing more reports of tar spot and the severity catching up as well. Now, keep in mind that for southern rust is the opposite, right? Southern rust likes hot and humid. So keep in mind that we're going to be managing those fields for more than one disease. Previous crop, we know that southern rust is going to be moving from the south. So we're going to be seeing, in Arkansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, and then, Kansas, eventually it's going to be moving, and we can find it anywhere in the canop. Now, for tar spot, gray leaf spot, and bacterial leaf streak, those diseases, they survive in crop residue. So if you know the history of those fields, if you have had problems before of those fields, it's going to be there, and it's going to be with a higher risk of us losing that yield, right? So just making sure that you're monitoring, especially for tar spot, if you had it in the previous years, that you are keeping a close look at those fields specifically.
Besides corn diseases, anything else growers should be watching for in their fields?
Corn leafhopper, right? It was first reported here in Kansas about 2 years ago. And as of June now, it was just reported in Oklahoma a few weeks ago. So just keep in mind there too, when you're out there scouting for disease, that you're also looking for those leafhoppers. Now, just be mindful that there are many types of leafhoppers out there, right? But the corn leafhopper specifically, it's fairly similar with Astor's leafhopper, right? So there are more than one leafhopper that you're going to be finding in that field, and not all leafhoppers are going to be corn leafhopper. Corn leafhopper is relatively simple to identify. If you have one of those magnification glass, they're light in color. They have those two dotted spots in between the eyes. And when you look in the bottom side of that leafhopper, you're not going to see any facial marks on that leafhopper. When you have an Astor leafhopper, it still has those two black spots between those eyes. However, the bottom part of that leafhopper, the Astor leafhopper, it's going to be with a lot of marks on that face, right? So just kind of like an easy way for us to identify here. We are offering free testing for the corn leafhopper. We can confirm that through molecular techniques that what you have is either a leafhopper, a corn leafhopper or not, but also for the disease that those hoppers can carry as well, right? That's one of the biggest concern with corn leafhopper. It's actually not the leafhopper itself, but the disease that can be transmitted by.
And what disease is that? That's the main concern.
So yeah, the main concern right now is with corn stunt spiroplasma, which is associated with the leafhopper, right? The double maize. It was first detected, the disease in Kansas in 2024, and we confirm in field crop, but as well sweet corn, right? So if you're growing that too, just keep in mind that those are also susceptible for. The challenge with corn stunt spiroplasma, one of the challenges, right, is that our fungicides will not do anything to it, and the symptoms can take up to 30, 40 days for us to visually see it in the field. It's almost like that green breed, right? They have to acquire from a sick plant, probably down in Texas or, in a place where, they are already infected corn plants. And as they move in north, they're going to be carrying that to the other states. So just keep that in mind too, that over the winter, we were monitoring corn leafhopper and corn stunt, right? Of course, we did not find any corn leafhopper, I think, after that first or second week of December. So we're having like a reset. However, with the detection in Oklahoma, it's kind of like, honestly, it's a little bit of concern at this point with the majority of our corn being so late planted and so delayed because of all this rain that we are having, that this could also be an issue, right? For corn leafhopper, the current guidelines for application is if you confirm that you have corn leafhopper, the recommendation is to spray, right? Just to try to get that population level low.
For wanting to track all of these corn diseases, is there a resource that is available for growers?
Yes, that's a very good question. As the 2026 growing season progresses, and a lot of questions are going to be being asked regarding the disease in corn leafhopper, we now have an exciting tool together with the Kansas Corn Commission, which is called now the Kansas Corn Disease Network. So the network is a collaborative effort between Kansas Corn, the K-State Plant Pathology Department, and a lot of extension agents, crop consultants, the independent crop consultants, and Corteva as well, that we're monitoring in Kansas, 35 counties. And Shelby, it's a massive network. We have learned so much with all the agents, the specialists, crop consultants that are helping, because at the end, we are monitoring more than just corn leafhopper, right? We're monitoring tar spot, we're monitoring southern rust, and with the weather conditions, crop development, and disease movement, right? Things can change quite rapidly. So having this network and awareness is extremely important for our producers.
That was K-State Extension row crop specialist Rodrigo Onofre. I will link the Kansas Corn Disease Network in today's show notes on agtoday.net. We're cutting to a short break now, but we'll be right back. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we conclude our Friday show with a weather update from K-State meteorologist Chip Redmond. Chip, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Chip, I feel like Kansas has seen a lot of rain, and is that the case for everywhere in Kansas?
Yeah, the folks that have seen rain over the course of the last week, it's really rained. And for the most part, pretty much everyone's got in on the heavier rains. We've had some impressive totals, the highest amounts just for the last 7 days as we record this. There's more rain falling right now in the state, so it's not going to capture it all, but as much as over 10 inches of rain in South Central and really that whole southern corridor really got hit, but also the Northwest got a lot of moisture with up to 3 to 6 inches of rain in places. Some of that was accompanied by some severe weather as well, where we had hail. Unfortunately, had a pretty negative impact to crops, especially around the Thomas County, Sheridan County area. And then we also even had some strong winds that were associated with those as well. So it's been a full gamut, an active severe weather, an active weather pattern. We look at the state as a whole this time of year, anywhere from an inch to an inch and a half of precipitation is expected on a weekly basis. So when we're talking a weekly totals of 6, 7, 10 inches of rain, we're talking a lot of moisture that's making dents on the drought and definitely helping us store up some moisture for later in the summer.
As we have also seen cooler temperatures with that, are we going to continue to see cooler temperatures?
Yeah, when we had that much cloud cover and thunderstorm activity, these waves or clusters of thunderstorms when they move across the region. That's really helped keep temperatures checked up. We did start the month warmer than normal, but the cooler temperatures over the course of the last week really offset that. So we look at the month-to-date average, we're looking at around average for temperatures. And definitely enjoy the cooler weather, though, because things are about to change. We've got a ridge of high pressure that's going to begin to develop in the south, the Gulf South, and that's going to expand rapidly starting as early as Sunday and into Monday. And what that's going to do is a couple of things. First, it's going to end this northwest flow pattern with clusters of storms and move from the northwest southeastward into the state. That's going to cut off that pattern and really start to dry things out, where we're going to see much less thunderstorm activity, if any. It's going to become just isolated in nature. And then we're gonna really heat things up. It's that time of the year where we get a dominant ridge of high pressure like this. It can have some impressive temperatures. And we're going to start out fairly normal, and that's going to feel warmer than normal just because of the humidity in the air from all the recent rain, but additionally, because you've been cooler than normal last week. But then we're going to really start to turn that dial up by early next week. We're going to start to see temperatures in the mid 90s and might even get to the upper 90s by the end of the week around the 4th of July, when the heat's likely to peak, and it's going to be just hot. Just flat out going to be hot. But we're going to see some wind. And this time of year, we start seeing these strong high pressures at least initially develop. We get some pretty strong pressure gradients in the state, and that allows for gusty southerly winds across the region, which will help take the edge off some of that heat. But I'm also worried it's going to start to dry things out really quick as we get into early July. We still average an inch to an inch and a half a week across the region. So when we don't get that, and then we add in the heat and the wind, we can really offset this recent moisture quickly. And so that's something to watch as we move into July, where we definitely are in a warmer, drier pattern for the middle of summer.
When we look at the long-term forecast, is there any more moisture in it?
Yeah, well, we got to turn our attention to the monsoonal moisture that's going to slowly start to enter the southwestern United States. That is going to be our best source of moisture as we go into the middle of July. And right now, models are just not handling it very well. So confidence is very low. I'm thinking July is going to be a pretty dry month, unless, and the one caveat, we get that, or we get some positive feedback where we start to see some pop-up thunderstorms because of all the moisture at the surface. So overall, I think July is going to be warm and dry.
Chip, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Yep, thanks for having me.
That was K-State meteorologist Chip Redmond. That's what we have for you today on Agriculture Today, but we'll be back with more for you on Monday.